Have you ever heard of a war started over a bucket? It sounds like a punchline to a bad joke, right? But in 1325, in northern Italy, this wasn't a joke. It was a deadly serious conflict known as the War of the Bucket. Get ready, because today we're diving deep into one of history's most bizarre and fascinating conflicts. So, picture this: Italy in the 14th century. It wasn't the unified country we know today. Instead, it was a patchwork of rival city-states, constantly squabbling over land, power, and prestige. At the heart of this turmoil were two major political factions, the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. Now, this is where it gets a little complex, but stick with me. The Guelphs generally supported the Pope, while the Ghibellines backed the Holy Roman Emperor. Think of them as two massive, rival sports teams, but instead of trading players, they traded insults, raids, and occasionally, full-blown warfare. Their rivalry was bitter, deep-rooted, and it poisoned relations between neighboring cities for generations. Our story centers on two such rival cities, Bologna and Medina. Bologna was a staunchly Guelph city, loyal to the Pope. Medina, just a stone's throw away, was fiercely Ghibelline, loyal to the emperor. For years, these two cities had been at each other's throats. Border skirmishes were common, lands were seized, and castles were captured and recaptured. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Each side was just waiting for an excuse, any excuse, to escalate things. And that excuse, unbelievably, came in the form of a simple wooden bucket. The popular legend goes like this: in the dead of night, a small group of Modenese soldiers snuck into the city of Bologna. Their mission wasn't to assassinate a leader or burn down a building. No, their goal was far stranger. They made their way to the city's main well and stole the oaken bucket used to draw water. They then paraded it back to Medina as a trophy, a hilarious prank meant to humiliate their rivals. As you can imagine, the Bolognese were not amused. In fact, they were furious. To them, this wasn't just a stolen bucket. It was a profound insult to their city's honor. It was a symbol of their vulnerability and Medina's arrogance. Bologna immediately sent envoys to Medina, demanding the return of their precious bucket. Medina, flush with their successful prank, essentially laughed in their faces and refused. That was the last straw. For Bologna, this was a matter of principle. They declared war. Yes, a war. Over a bucket. Now, it's important to understand that the bucket wasn't the real reason for the war. It was just the spark that lit a massive powder keg of pre-existing tensions. Decades of political rivalry, land disputes, and pure hatred between the Guelphs and Ghibellines had been simmering just below the surface. The bucket was simply the perfect, almost absurd, excuse for both sides to finally have the major showdown they'd been building towards. With war declared, both cities began to rally their forces. Bologna, being the larger and wealthier city, assembled a massive army. Sources say they mustered around 30,000 infantry and 2,000 knights. This was a huge force for the time, and they were confident of a quick and decisive victory. They marched out under the command of their podesta, their chief magistrate, intending to teach Medina a lesson they would never forget. Medina, on the other hand, was heavily outnumbered. They could only scrape together about 5,000 infantry and 2,000 knights. On paper, it looked like a slaughter waiting to happen. But the Modenese had a few aces up their sleeve. They were fighting on their home turf, defending their city, and they had support from other Ghibelline powers, including the powerful lords of Milan and Mantua, who sent veteran German knights to aid them. Their commanders were also seasoned and clever. The two armies finally met on November 15th, 1325, just outside the walls of Medina, near a small village called Zappolino. The battle that followed would go down in history. The Bolognese army, overconfident due to their superior numbers, advanced in a somewhat disorganized fashion. They expected the Modenese to simply crumble before their might. But the Modenese, led by the capable Passerino Bonacolsi, had chosen their ground well. They held a strong defensive position and waited for the perfect moment to strike. As the Bolognese forces approached, the Ghibelline commanders unleashed their secret weapon, their highly disciplined and heavily armored knights, including those battle-hardened German mercenaries. The Modenese cavalry charged with incredible force and precision, slamming into the flank of the advancing Bolognese army. The shock was immense. The Bolognese lines, caught completely off guard, began to waver, Panic spread like wildfire through their ranks. What was supposed to be an easy victory was quickly turning into a nightmare. The Guelph soldiers, many of whom were less experienced militia, broke and fled. The battle, which lasted only a couple of hours, turned into a complete rout. The Modenese pursued the fleeing Bolognese all the way back to the gates of Bologna, slaughtering thousands along the way. They didn't manage to take the city itself, as its walls were too strong. But they spent several days camped outside, taunting their defeated enemies and raiding the surrounding countryside. To add insult to injury, they even held a mock celebratory festival just outside Bologna's gates, ensuring their humiliated rivals could see and hear everything. The aftermath was brutal. An estimated 2,000 men lay dead on the field of Zappolino. It was a catastrophic defeat for Bologna and a stunning, almost miraculous, victory for Modena. The Ghibellines had proven that numbers aren't everything and that a smaller, well-led, and highly motivated force could triumph over a larger, complacent enemy. And what about the bucket? Well, after their victory, the Modenese, of course, kept it. They saw it as the ultimate symbol of their triumph. The original bucket, or at least the one believed to be the original, is still on display in Modena to this day. You can see it in the Torre della Ghirlandina, the bell tower of the Modena Cathedral, proudly displayed as a testament to this bizarre chapter in their city's history. A peace treaty was eventually signed a few months later, but the bucket was never returned. The war didn't drastically change the political map of Italy, and the Guelph-Ghibelline conflict continued to rage for many more years. But the story of the War of the Bucket has endured for centuries as a perfect, almost comical, example of how seemingly trivial matters can escalate into major conflicts when layered on top of deep-seated rivalries. It serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the stated cause of a conflict is just a convenient excuse for a fight that was going to happen anyway. Whether it's a stolen bucket, a political disagreement, or a dispute over a border, the real fuel for the fire is often the long-held animosity between people. The War of the Bucket is more than just a funny historical anecdote. It's a timeless lesson about human nature, pride, and the absurdity of war. So, the next time you see a simple, everyday object like a bucket, remember this story. Remember how, almost 700 years ago, one like it was enough to send thousands of men into a bloody battle, leaving an indelible and very strange mark on the pages of history. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the weird and wonderful corners of history. Let me know in the comments what other strange historical events you'd like to hear about. Until next time, stay curious.